now turn up.
Welcome, it is Marcus Dynasty Football Dads. We're giving away a Jerry Jeudy signed jersey. We are getting closer and closer to 1K. When we hit 1K, we're going to be randomly giving it away to one of you guys. So, I'm here to talk about rookie strategy. And not only rookie strategy, why you need to act more like it's the NFL draft compared to a redraft system. In a redraft system, of course, it is most likely snake. You have the same number of picks, 15, 16, 17, as every single other team. And there's a lot of different, differences between that and a rookie draft. A rookie draft, some teams may not have picks. Some teams may have like 5, 6 first-round picks or 7 total picks in the first 2 rounds. We need to start acting like it's more of like the NFL draft compared to the actual redraft system. And I see people make a mistake of this way too often. The first thing you'll see over into this corner here is a trade calculator. Trade calculators are very, general, and this is one that has been compiled of 5, 6 calculators that we all compile together. Now, know that every single year is different. This is just a standard year. If super flex, of course, Trevor Lawrence, you're going to want somebody to overpay for that one-on-one. And that's just a standard one-on-one. Like, is Joe Burrow worth the same as Trevor Lawrence from last year to this year? So use this calculator sparingly, but it will give you a general idea of where trading picks would lie into each other in this draft class. So let's talk about the NFL draft. The NFL draft, you have teams, of course, that are competing, and you have teams that are maybe not tanking, but are not as good. And those teams that are not as good, of course, are drafting early in the draft. Dynasty teams that are bad are usually drafting early in the draft class, which is normal. But we have to figure out, how do we go from that to competing? How do we go from, depending on what we have, how do we go from like Miami, who is absolutely horrible, to a team that's starting to compete and maybe a playoff team down the road? Same with Cleveland a couple years ago. The biggest key is to know where some of these players are going in the draft and how to utilize that to your advantage with what you have. NFL teams don't necessarily go best player available. The reason for that is because, like, let's say Miami, who had 6 and 18, if they let Jalen Waddle go down to 18, they may have not gotten him. So they picked him there at 6. You have to understand in dynasty drafts, stay with me here. I know this is going to be kind of a little bit confusing, but let's say you have pick 103, 106, 110. That's a lot different than just having 103. Or having 102, 104, and 201 is a lot different than just having 102 and 104. Knowing where some of these players are going, or I had even a question, do I reach for Pitts because I have a bunch of picks later in the first, early in the second? That is absolutely the right strategy to do, because you're going to have 4 or 5 wide receivers that you're going to draft, maybe 8th pick, 9th pick, and then 2 early seconds. Like, the chances are the difference between Pitts and Freiermuth is a lot different than maybe Chase and Elijah Moore. Like, that gap, that value-based drafting. You're trying to get from point A, which is maybe a team that's not so great, to a contending team as quick as possible. And this draft is one of those draft classes that can highly do that for you, because it has elite prospects at every single position. I mean, if you literally just took the number 1 on each position, you have Trevor Lawrence, Kyle Pitts, we'll just say Jamar Chase and Najee Harris. That is a dynasty roster that could compete as early as the end of this year in 2022. That is so incredibly important just in that fact. So don't just go necessarily best player available. Look at strategy-wise of what you can do. And if you have questions where you have multiple first-round picks, that is where you can utilize strategy to your advantage. Because if you only have 103, you're likely just going to take a player that's going to fit your roster. Whether that's, if you're running back needy, Javonte Williams and Travis Etienne. If you're wide receiver needy, probably Jamar Chase, maybe Devontae Smith in that mix as well. If you have multiple firsts, that can change things. Or if you have a lot of early seconds. We know from pick probably 105, 106, we'll just say 106 because it's probably easier. 106 to the mid-second round is a lot of really good wide receivers and some of the good quarterbacks in there if you're in 1 QB. So if we're talking about 1 QB leagues, that is why it's hard to draft a wide receiver super early, when you know that if if you have multiple first-round picks. If you only have one, if you just have 103 and you are desperately in need of a wide receiver, then Jamar Chase or Devontae Smith is the way to go. But if you are at 103 and you have 105 and you have, let's say, 110, then 103 almost has to be a running back or a different position, in my opinion, because you need to get a different position so then you can fill in with a wide receiver at 105. Or even if you have, let's say, 110, you could fill up a wide receiver there, and then now you have, let's say you end with Javonte Williams, Kyle Pitts, and Jalen Waddle or Rashad Bateman. Now you have 3 really good positions to fill in, and maybe you even have a second. So look at the different strategies. The NFL draft is something that you need to start kind of not modeling it after, but figuring out, okay, these GMs are trying to figure out, well, how do I get all these different draft picks to fit our team and our system and to make sure that we're trying to hit our goals? Because if you have 5 really good let's say you have 5 picks and you draft all wide receivers, I mean, yeah, you're going to maybe have 2-3 of them hit, but that's just a hard situation to sell. The one counter argument I will say is if you have a really good trading system, like you can trade, then best player available might be the strategy to go. But just know that is not always the situation. People that draft their players sometimes get stuck on them. I've seen it with Kerryon Johnson, Corey Davis, Sammy Watkins, Mike Williams. List goes on and on and on and on. And even Royce Freeman and stuff. Teams that draft their players, and you have to know your own league, sometimes want to hold on because they drafted him. They love him. They say Jerry Jeudy of last year, I have him. Am I selling him? No, because I know I love him as a player. I might love him more than the other 11 teams or 10 teams. So if you're trying to get him away from me, I might want more than the other 10 owners that would have had him. So that's where best player available can be a strategy to be utilized, but know that you are trying, like this draft class is one of those draft classes where it's easier to kind of try to model your roster after, because the top, let's see, 3, 6, 7, the top 7 players are elite. And then you even get into like 8 through 12, they are still really good players. 8 through actually like 13, 14 are still really good players. So that's my announcement that I just wanted to kind of say through here, because I see way too often teams are messing up. They have 102, 107, 110, and 201, and all of a sudden 102, Jamar Chase, and then they think they're going to get somebody else, and all of a sudden it's another wide receiver, and another wide receiver, and another wide receiver, and it's like, that's great in theory, but are you going to be able to trade those wide receivers? And if you are a running back needy team, then you're making a mistake. So just kind of trying to see, it's what the NFL draft does. They're trying to model best player available and team needs. It's trying to balance that scheme out. So know it's not just best player available always, and it's not team need always. There is a balanced scheme to it. And if you have questions through it, that is why you reach out to us Dynasty people that have done this for years, because we understand and know, at least not in all details, because we don't know how your league operates, and we don't know how needy other teams are, and we don't know how if you have 4 teams with all the good running backs and 8 teams that have horrible running backs, geez, my cat's just trying to break stuff over there, then that's going to be a lot different than running backs being kind of spread out. Okay, maybe running backs are going to be really needy because you have 8 teams that are desperately in need of running backs versus teams that have kind of a split even running backs out there. Same with quarterbacks and super flex. If you have a couple teams that are super needy that need 2-3 quarterbacks, you might see them really try to reach up into the early super flex rounds here. So that is kind of my strategy through it. Based on what draft picks you have might determine and might change the actual draft pick rankings of what I would assume that you need. The biggest example is if you have a lot of picks, then you need to be doing different positions than wide receivers in the beginning, because that Kyle Pitts and the running backs, this is at 1 QB, are specifically going to be important versus the depth. If you pick 3 wide receivers, if you pick both Moores and Bateman, likely one of those are going to hit, and you'll have still running backs and maybe Kyle Pitts. Maybe you'll have Javonte Williams and Kyle Pitts in the beginning, versus having Chase and a bunch of different other wide receivers, and you have 2-3 of the wide receivers hit, but now you're stuck at a team need, and now you might have to reach next year, 2022 or 2023. It just puts a snowball effect. Now you might have to reach. And we don't want people reaching, because then you end up with Zach Moss or Keyshawn Vaughn or all the different other running backs or tight ends or quarterbacks that have been reached way too far that we don't want. That's what happens, and we don't want that. So again, this is Marcus Dynasty Football Dads. We're giving away a free Jerry Jeudy signed jersey. We will see you tomorrow. Peace out. Take care. Bye.
Now turn up.